Aloha mai kako. So what I want to do is I want to quickly review part two, building the first row with two columns using the div tag. I want to just take a moment to pause and let's just go over what we're trying to do. So this screenshot here represents the desired result. And we are working on the first row of our website. You'll notice that there's one row, and within that row there's two columns. So this is defined as one column, and the image sits in a second column. And the first column has the headings and the paragraph, and the second column only has an image in it. And we're going to build that website structure using something called a div tag. And what I did here was I wanted to kind of take away the content, and I wanted to show you how we're going to implement the CSS the custom CSS that you put together in your style.css in part one. So in this next part, what I want you guys to do is we're going to use the div tags to create our rows and columns. And this is how we build basic web page structure. And we use the div tags to do that. What I want you to do is we're going to define our grid. We're going to define our first row, and we're going to define our two columns, and we're going to do this in the index.html file. So this illustration right here represents what we see here. So what I've done is I've sort of just taken the content away, and these names here, .grid, .row, .col, -2, these are the custom classes that we just created in part one. So I just wanted to show you what it's supposed to look like. And I want you to go to your index.html file and find the body tag, the opening body tag, and you can just copy and paste right from this document. And I want you to paste it over to your Riplet project. Now notice that I color coded. So I color coded the div tags here. And so this darker purple represents the grid, right? Which is the container that our web page sits in. And the lighter blue is the row, right? And then the light peach color here, this represents the actual columns, right? So you might be thinking to yourself, well, where does the content sit? So remember that the content sits inside of the columns. So the content is actually going to sit in between the div tags here for the column -2 custom class, right? Between these two div tags. Let's move over to the Riplet project so you can see how this should look like in your project. So here it is right here. This is exactly what I wanted you to copy and paste. Now, in order to make it look like this, right? Like our mock-up, we need to make sure that we copy and paste the headings and the paragraph and the image in the correct places. Okay, guys, so what I've done is I have copied and pasted the content in the correct places. And so if you look here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of unhighlight. I pasted the H1 into the first column, right? So the first column is right here. And you can see when you click on your div tag you'll see that it highlights the opening of the div and the closing div tag for that specific column, right? So this is the content that is sitting within the column, and column 2 is sitting within row 1. Row 1 contains 2 columns. And why does it contain column 2 versus column 1? Because column 1 is 100% of the width of the row, whereas column 2 is 50%. So you can stick two COL-2 columns into a single row, which then the width adds up to 100%. So if we look back at our CSS, you'll notice that column 2, the width is 50%. So you can stick 2 columns into that row, right? Because a row represents 100% of the width. So there's a little math involved in structuring and creating your custom CSS classes for your columns that are going to sit in the rows. But let's go back to the index.html file. Okay, so here we are. So as you can see, we've got our heading here, our H1, we've got our H3, and then we have our paragraph down here. And then I close up that column because in the second column is where my image is going to sit. So here's my second image. Oh, sorry, here's my second column. And you'll notice that the only content, right, the only content that is sitting in that second column is my image. And then this, if you click on this bottom tag, this is the entire row. So columns sit in rows and content sits in the columns. And that's exactly what we have here. Now we've only dealt with the first row. You might be wondering, you might be asking yourself, well, where is the closing div tag for the grid? Well, you may have guessed that it's down here, because what you're going to work on next is you're going to work on creating another row with 2 columns. And I want you to, I'm just going to pull this over here. I want you to create 2 rows. So once again, your H1, your H3, and your paragraph is going to sit in the column on the left hand side, and then your image is going to sit in a column on your right hand side. So that is your challenge for this lesson. Aloha.